months pregnant, live television, and her husband was about to destroy her in front of millions. "I can't do this anymore," Liam said, his voice steady, rehearsed. The audience held its breath. Clara felt her heart stop. This was supposed to be their anniversary special, a celebration of love, a tribute to their perfect marriage. Instead, Liam Cross, America's rising star, the man she'd built her life around, looked straight into the camera and smiled. "I'm filing for divorce." The crowd gasped. Cameras zoomed in on Clara's face, catching every flicker of shock, every crack in her composure. She tried to speak, but her throat closed. The host stammered something about commercial breaks, but nobody moved. This wasn't a mistake. This was planned. Liam had orchestrated her humiliation like a movie scene, and she was the tragic fool everyone would talk about tomorrow. "Liam, what are you?" Clara's voice broke. "I've been pretending for too long," he continued, turning to the audience like a man confessing his sins at church. "I married her because I thought it was what I needed, but I can't live a lie anymore. I deserve to be happy." Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The applause started slowly, then grew louder. People were clapping. They were clapping for him, for his honesty, for his bravery. Clara sat frozen, her belly heavy, her wedding ring suddenly feeling like a noose around her finger. She looked down at her hands, at the diamond that had once meant forever, and felt bile rise in her throat. The host tried to salvage the moment. "Clara, would you like to respond?" What could she say? That she'd given up her career for him? That she'd smiled through every red carpet event while he flirted with co-stars? That she'd ignored the rumors because she believed in their vows? The truth didn't matter anymore. He'd already written the ending. "I'm 8 months pregnant," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible over the murmurs. Liam didn't flinch. "I know, and I'll support the child. But I can't support a marriage built on expectations." The cameras caught everything. Her tears, his cold composure, the way she stood up, legs shaking, and walked off the stage while the audience sat in stunned silence. Security tried to shield her, but it was too late. Her humiliation was already trending online. Outside, the night air hit her like a slap. Paparazzi swarmed, shouting questions she couldn't hear over the ringing in her ears. Flashes blinded her. Microphones jabbed at her face. She stumbled toward the car, her driver nowhere in sight, and collapsed against a wall. "Clara, how do you feel? Did you see it coming? Is the baby even his?" She pressed her hands over her ears and slid down to the pavement. The baby kicked hard, as if protesting the chaos. Clara wrapped her arms around her stomach and sobbed. She'd lost everything in 30 seconds. Her marriage, her dignity, her future, and the whole world had watched. But she wasn't completely alone. Across the city, in a penthouse office overlooking the glittering skyline, a man sat in the dark, watching the live broadcast on his phone. Evan Rothwell, CEO of Rothwell Enterprises, a name whispered in boardrooms and feared in business circles, rewound the video. He watched Clara's face again. Not the tears, not the collapse, but the moment right before Liam spoke, when her eyes held hope. He'd seen that look before, on someone he'd lost, and it haunted him. Evan set down his phone and stared out at the city. He didn't know Clara Wynn. He'd never met her, but something about her pain reached through the screen and grabbed him by the throat. She wasn't just another celebrity scandal. She was a woman drowning in public, and nobody was throwing her a lifeline. He picked up his phone again and made a call. Find out everything about Clara Wynn. Hospital she's registered at. Address. Who's still in her corner. And make sure she's safe tonight. "Sir, is this business related?" Evan paused. Not yet. Back at the studio, Clara finally made it to a cab. She gave the driver her address through broken sobs, her phone buzzing non-stop with messages she couldn't bear to read. The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror, but said nothing. Everyone would know her face by morning. Everyone would have an opinion. And none of them would care that her heart was shattered beyond repair. As the cab pulled away, Clara looked back at the studio one last time. The lights still glowed. The show would go on. Liam would give interviews about his brave decision, and she would become a cautionary tale. But somewhere in the darkness, Someone had already decided she deserved more than pity. Someone who wouldn't let her drown. What would you do if the person you trusted most destroyed you in front of the whole world? Would you fight back or disappear forever? The headlines hit before sunrise. Clara woke to her phone vibrating so violently it fell off the nightstand. She didn't need a look. She already knew what they were saying. Celebrity wife dumped while pregnant. The fall of Clara Wynn. Liam Cross finally breaks free from toxic marriage. Sources say Clara was controlling and obsessive. She sat up in bed, her body aching, her eyes swollen from crying. The apartment felt suffocating. This place had been their home, filled with photos of happier times that now felt like lies. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands and made the mistake of opening social media. The comments were merciless. She probably trapped him with that baby. Liam deserves better. Look how miserable he was. Imagine being so pathetic your husband leaves you on live TV. Clara scrolled until her vision blurred. Thousands of strangers, people who didn't know her, had decided she was the villain. Liam's team had moved fast, planting stories about her jealousy, her demands, her supposed emotional instability. By morning, he wasn't the man who'd humiliated his pregnant wife. He was the brave soul who'd escaped. She threw the phone across the room and heard it crack against the wall. Good. She didn't want to see anymore. A knock at the door made her freeze. Paparazzi. They'd been camped outside since midnight, waiting for a photo of her breakdown. She pulled the curtains tighter and sat in the darkness, her hand on her belly. The baby kicked, oblivious to the storm outside. Clara Wynn, can we get a statement? A voice shouted through the door. How does it feel to be dumped on national television? Are you going to fight for custody? She covered her ears and sank to the floor. This was her life now. A circus. A spectacle. She'd become the punchline to a joke she never signed up for. Hours passed. The knocking stopped, but the crowd outside didn't leave. Clara finally stood and walked to the bedroom, pulling out the wedding dress she'd worn 2 years ago. White silk, lace sleeves. She felt like a princess that day. Now, holding it, she felt like a fool. She crumpled the dress in her arms and sobbed into the fabric. Every promise Liam had made echoed in her head. Forever. Partnership. Love. All of it had been performance. And she'd been too blind to see it. Her lawyer called around noon. His voice was careful, professional. Clara, we need to talk about next steps. Liam's team has already filed. They're moving fast. Let them, Clara whispered. I don't want anything from him. Clara, you're entitled to. I said I don't want anything. She hung up. What was the point? Money wouldn't fix this. A settlement wouldn't erase the humiliation. She just wanted to disappear, to go somewhere nobody knew her name or her face or her failure. But the world wasn't going to let her disappear. By evening, every major news outlet had covered the story. Entertainment shows dissected her body language during the broadcast. Relationship experts weighed in on what she'd done wrong. Even strangers on the street recognized her, their stares a mix of pity and judgment. Clara made a decision. She packed a small bag, just the essentials, and slipped out the back exit of her building while the paparazzi waited out front. She had no plan, no destination. She just needed to run. The rain started as she walked down the empty street, her hood pulled low. She didn't have a car anymore. Liam had taken it. She didn't have friends she could call. They'd all been his friends first. She was alone in a city that had once felt like home. But she wasn't the only one awake that night. Miles away, in his penthouse, Evan Rothwell sat at his desk, reading the reports his assistant had compiled. Clara Wynn, 27, no criminal record, no scandals before this. She'd been a marketing consultant before marrying Liam, gave up her career to support his. No family in the city, no close friends listed, bank account nearly empty. Evan leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. The more he read, the angrier he became. Not at Clara, at the world that had chewed her up and spit her out for entertainment. His assistant knocked and entered. Sir, she left her apartment an hour ago. Security footage shows she's on foot, heading toward the east side. Evan stood. Send the car. Sir, send the car. Now, and tell the driver to be discreet. She doesn't need more cameras in her face. The assistant hesitated, then nodded and left. Evan walked to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. He didn't know why he cared. He'd built an empire by staying detached, by making decisions based on logic, not emotion. But something about Clara's story had cracked through his walls. Maybe it was the way she'd looked at Liam right before he spoke. That flicker of hope. Or maybe it was the way the world had turned on her so quickly, so viciously, without asking for her side. Either way, he wasn't going to let her drown. Clara walked until her feet ached, until the rain soaked through her jacket, until she couldn't feel the cold anymore. She stopped under a streetlight, gasping for air, her body trembling. The baby kicked hard, a reminder that she wasn't just running for herself. Headlights appeared behind her. A black car slowed to a stop. Clara's heart raced. More paparazzi? More people wanting a piece of her pain? The driver's window rolled down. A man in a suit, professional, kind eyes. "Ma'am, you shouldn't be out here alone. Can we give you a ride?" Clara stepped back. "I don't need help." "With respect, ma'am, you do." Before she could argue, the back door opened, and a voice from inside said, "Please, just let us get you somewhere safe. Would you trust a stranger in your darkest moment? Or would you keep running until there was nowhere left to go?" Clara stared at the open car door, rain dripping from her hair, her body shaking from cold and exhaustion. Every instinct screamed at her to run. Strangers couldn't be trusted. Not anymore. Not after Liam had proven that even the people who promised forever could turn into enemies overnight. "I don't know you," Clara said, her voice barely audible over the rain. The driver stepped out, holding an umbrella. He didn't move closer, didn't pressure her. "No, ma'am, you don't. But you're 8 months pregnant, soaked to the bone, and it's 38 degrees out here. Whatever you're running from, it'll still be there tomorrow. But if you collapse out here tonight, you might not be." Clara's legs trembled. He was right. She could feel her body giving out, the baby pressing heavily against her lungs, making it hard to breathe. She looked down the empty street, then back at the car. What choice did she have? She climbed in. The warmth hit her immediately. Leather seats. Soft music playing low. A blanket folded neatly beside her. Clara wrapped it around herself and leaned back, her eyes closing as the exhaustion finally caught up. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't care anymore. The drive was silent. Clara drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of city lights passing by, then darker roads, then the sound of gravel under the tires. When the car stopped, she opened her eyes to see a small private clinic, modern and quiet, tucked away from the main roads. "Where are we?" Clara asked, panic creeping back in. "Somewhere safe," the driver said. "A doctor is waiting inside. No cameras, no press, just medical care." Clara hesitated, but her body made the decision for her. Pain shot through her abdomen, sharp and sudden. She gasped, clutching her stomach. The baby. Something was wrong. The driver moved fast. Within seconds, she was in a wheelchair, being rushed through automatic doors. Nurses appeared, calm and efficient, speaking in low voices. Clara tried to focus on their words, but everything blurred together. Contractions, stress, dehydration, possible early labor. She was placed on a bed in a private room, monitors attached to her belly, and 4 in her arm. The doctor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, checked her vitals and spoke softly. "You're going to be okay. The baby's heartbeat is strong, but you need to rest. Your body has been through trauma." Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. She didn't have the strength to speak. Hours passed. The contractions slowed. The monitors beeped steadily. Clara lay in the dim light, staring at the ceiling, wondering how her life had fallen apart so completely in less than 24 hours. A nurse came in with warm soup and tea. "You should eat," she said gently. "Who brought me here?" Clara asked. The nurse smiled. "Someone wanted to make sure you were safe. That's all I know." Clara wanted to press for more, but exhaustion pulled her under. She slept deeply for the first time in days, dreamless and heavy. When she woke, sunlight streamed through the blinds. Clara sat up slowly, her body sore but stable. The room was quiet, peaceful. On the side table, she noticed a small note written in elegant handwriting. You deserve peace. Rest. No cameras here. It wasn't signed. Clara read it 3 times, her chest tightening. Someone had saved her. A stranger had pulled her out of the rain, brought her to safety, and asked for nothing in return. It didn't make sense. People didn't do that. Not in her world. Not without an agenda. She stayed at the clinic for 3 more days. The staff was professional but warm, checking on her regularly, making sure she ate, making sure the baby was healthy. Nobody asked about Liam. Nobody mentioned the scandal. It was like stepping into a different universe, one where her pain wasn't entertainment. On the 3rd night, Clara stood by the window, watching the stars. Her phone had been off since she arrived, tucked away in her bag. She wasn't ready to face the world yet, but she couldn't hide forever. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. The nurse entered with another note. "This just arrived for you." Clara unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was the same. "When you're ready to leave, a car will take you anywhere you want to go. There's no pressure, no expectations. You're safe here as long as you need to be." Still no signature. Still no name. Clara pressed the note to her chest and closed her eyes. Whoever this person was, they'd given her something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Not the naive kind she'd had with Liam, but something quieter. A belief that maybe, just maybe, not everyone in the world was cruel. The next morning, Clara was discharged. The doctor gave her instructions for bed rest and a follow-up appointment in 2 weeks. As promised, a car waited outside. The same driver, the same kind eyes. "Where to, ma'am?" he asked. Clara realized she didn't have an answer. She couldn't go back to the apartment. She couldn't face the paparazzi. She had nowhere to go. "Is there somewhere quiet?" Clara asked. "Somewhere I can think." The driver nodded. "I know just a place." He drove her to a small guest house on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by trees and far from prying eyes. The owner, an older woman with a warm smile, showed Clara to a cozy room with a fireplace and a view of the garden. "Stay as long as you need, dear," the woman said. "Everything's been taken care of." Clara wanted to ask questions. Who paid for this? Who was behind all of it? But the words stuck in her throat. Maybe some mysteries were better left alone. Maybe, for once, she should just accept the kindness. That night, Clara sat by the fire, her hand on her belly, and allowed herself to breathe. The baby kicked gently, as if sensing her mother's calm. For the first time since the broadcast, Clara felt something other than pain. She felt gratitude, but in the back of her mind, a question lingered. Why would someone go through all this trouble for her? What did they want? And more importantly, who were they? Miles away, Evan Rothwell sat in his office, watching security footage of Clara arriving at the guest house. His assistant stood nearby, arms crossed. "She's settled in," the assistant said. "What now?" Evan didn't answer immediately. He watched Clara through the screen, the way she touched her stomach, the way her shoulders finally relaxed. He told himself this was just charity, a good deed, nothing more. But he knew he was lying. Have you ever wondered if the kindness of a stranger could save you? Or would you question their motives until you pushed them away? 3 weeks later, Clara gave birth to a baby girl. She named her Aria, after the Italian word for air, because in that moment, holding her daughter for the first time, Clara finally felt like she could breathe again. The delivery was smooth, private, and quiet. No press, no drama, just Clara, the medical team, and the overwhelming rush of love that hit her the second Aria opened her eyes. Everything she'd been through suddenly made sense. This tiny human, with her perfect fingers and soft cries, was worth every ounce of pain. Clara spent the first week in a haze of sleepless nights and tender moments. Aria was healthy, strong, and had a surprisingly loud cry for someone so small. The guest house owner helped, with meals and laundry, never asking questions, never prying. It was the peace Clara desperately needed. But reality had a way of creeping back in. The hospital bill arrived first. Clara opened the envelope with shaking hands, expecting a number that would bury her. Instead, she found a single word stamped across the balance, paid. She called the billing department immediately. "There's been a mistake. This bill, it says it's paid, but I didn't." "No mistake, Ms. Wynn. The account was settled in full by Rothwell Enterprises. Is there anything else I can help you with?" Clara's breath caught. Rothwell Enterprises? Yes, ma'am. They covered everything. Delivery, recovery, postnatal care. You're all set. Clara hung up, staring at Arya, sleeping peacefully in the bassinet beside her. Rothwell Enterprises. She'd heard the name before, seen it in business headlines, but never thought it would intersect with her life. Why would a massive corporation pay her medical bills? What do they want from her? The answer came 2 days later in the form of a letter delivered by courier. Dear Ms. Wynne, we hope this message finds you and your daughter in good health. Rothwell Enterprises is currently seeking a remote content consultant for our philanthropic division. Given your background in marketing and communications, we believe you'd be an excellent fit. The position offers flexible hours, competitive pay, and the ability to work from home. If interested, please contact us at your earliest convenience. No pressure, no obligations, just an opportunity. Clara read the letter 5 times. This couldn't be real. Companies didn't just offer jobs to disgraced celebrity wives with newborns. There had to be a catch. But when she looked at Arya, when she thought about the empty bank account and the mounting costs of diapers and formula, she knew she couldn't afford to be suspicious. She called the number. The woman who answered was professional and warm. MS. Wynne, we're so glad you reached out. The position is yours if you want it. We reviewed your previous work, and we're impressed. We believe in second chances here. Clara's throat tightened. Why me? Because talent doesn't disappear just because life gets hard, the woman said simply. When can you start? Clara started the following Monday. The work was exactly as described, creating content strategies for charity campaigns, writing social media copy, coordinating with designers. It was meaningful, engaging, and best of all, it kept her mind occupied. She worked during Arya's naps, late at night after feedings, whenever she could carve out time. The paychecks were generous, more than generous, enough to cover rent, food, and start saving for Arya's future. Clara couldn't believe her luck. For the first time since the divorce, she felt like she had control over her life again. But she still didn't know who was behind it all. Rothwell Enterprises was huge, a conglomerate with branches in real estate, technology, and philanthropy. The CEO's name was Evan Rothwell, but Clara had never met him. All her communication went through department heads and project managers. She told herself it didn't matter. Someone had helped her, and she was grateful. That was enough. Except it wasn't. Late one night, after putting Arya down, Clara searched for Evan Rothwell online. Photos appeared, tall, dark-haired, sharp features, eyes that looked both intense and distant. He was younger than she expected, maybe mid-30s. Articles described him as brilliant, ruthless in business, and fiercely private. He rarely gave interviews, avoided social events, and had a reputation for being impossible to read. One article caught her attention. Rothwell's tragic past, the fiancée he lost. Clara clicked on it and read about a woman named Sophie, Evan's first love, who died in a car accident 5 years ago. Since then, he'd thrown himself into work, building an empire but isolating himself from the world. Clara felt a strange pang of recognition. Loss, isolation, the walls you build to survive. She understood that better than most. She closed her laptop and looked at Arya, who slept soundly in her crib. Whoever Evan Rothwell was, whatever his reasons for helping her, Clara owed him everything. And part of her, the part she tried to ignore, wanted to thank him, wanted to know him. But fate had other plans. 2 months into her job, Clara received an email. Company-wide meeting next Thursday. All remote employees invited to attend in person at headquarters. Optional, but encouraged. Clara's first instinct was to decline. She hadn't been in public since the scandal. The thought of walking into a room full of people, of being recognized, made her stomach churn. But something pushed her to go. Curiosity, gratitude, maybe even the need to prove to herself that she could still exist in the world without falling apart. She hired a babysitter for Arya, put on a simple dress, and took the train to Rothwell Tower. The building was stunning, glass and steel, modern and imposing. Clara felt small walking through the lobby, surrounded by people in expensive suits moving with purpose. The meeting was held on the 20th floor in a large conference room. Clara slipped in quietly and took a seat near the back. The room filled quickly, employees chatting and laughing. Nobody seemed to notice her. Nobody cared. It was oddly comforting. Then he walked in. Evan Rothwell, taller in person, sharper. He moved with the kind of confidence that didn't need to be loud. The room quieted instantly. He took the stage, thanked everyone for their work, and began discussing the company's upcoming projects. Clara watched him, mesmerized. His voice was calm, measured, but there was something underneath it. A weight, a sadness he hid behind professionalism. She wondered if anyone else saw it. Halfway through his speech, Evan's eyes swept the room, and for a split second, they landed on Clara. He paused, just briefly, so quick that most people wouldn't have noticed. But Clara did, and in that pause, something shifted. He knew who she was. After the meeting, Clara tried to slip out quickly, but a voice stopped her. Ms. Wynne. She turned. Evan stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. Mr. Rothwell, Clara said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm glad you could make it, he said. How's the work treating you? It's good. Really good. I want to thank you, actually, for everything. The job. No need. Evan interrupted gently. You've earned it. Your work speaks for itself. Clara nodded, unsure what else to say. The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken questions. She wanted to ask why he'd helped her, what he wanted, but the words wouldn't come. Evan glanced toward the window, then back at her. If you ever need anything, my door is open. Figuratively speaking. Clara smiled despite herself. Thank you. He nodded and walked away, leaving Clara standing there, her heart racing for reasons she couldn't quite name. What would you do if the person who saved you turned out to be someone you could fall for, but you weren't sure if you were ready to trust again? Clara couldn't stop thinking about him. It was ridiculous. She barely knew Evan Rothwell. They'd exchanged maybe 20 words. But something about the way he'd looked at her, the brief flicker of recognition in his eyes, stayed with her long after she returned home to Aria. Over the next few weeks, she told herself it was just gratitude. He'd given her a second chance when the world had written her off. Of course, she felt drawn to him. It didn't mean anything. But then he started showing up. Not in obvious ways. Not in ways that felt invasive. Just small moments that felt deliberate. He'd stop by the office on days Clara happened to be there for in-person meetings. He'd send thoughtful feedback on her projects, detailed notes that showed he actually read her work. Once, when Clara mentioned in a team email that she was struggling to find childcare for an upcoming presentation, an assistant reached out within the hour with contact information for a trusted babysitting service. Compliments of Mr. Rothwell. Clara didn't know what to make of it. Was he just a kind boss? Or was there something more? The answer came during a charity gala 3 months after Aria was born. Rothwell Enterprises was hosting a fundraiser for children's hospitals, and all employees were invited. Clara almost didn't go. The thought of dressing up, being around crowds, potentially being recognized, made her anxious. But her supervisor encouraged her, said it would be good for networking, and Clara needed this job too much to risk seeming ungrateful. She bought a simple black dress, nothing flashy, and arrived late enough to blend into the crowd. The venue was stunning, a historic hotel ballroom with crystal chandeliers and a live orchestra. Clara grabbed a glass of water and found a quiet corner, watching the room spin with wealth and power. Then she saw him. Evan stood near the stage, surrounded by investors and board members, nodding politely at whatever they were saying. But he looked uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. Clara recognized that feeling. The performance of socializing when your heart wasn't in it. Their eyes met across the room. This time, he didn't look away. He excused himself from the conversation and walked toward her, weaving through the crowd with purpose. Clara's heart hammered. She set down her water glass, suddenly very aware of how out of place she felt. You came, Evan said, stopping in front of her. I almost didn't, Clara admitted. I'm glad you did. His voice was quieter now, less formal than it had been at the office. How's Aria? Clara blinked. You remember her name? Of course. Evan's expression softened. You talk about her in your project notes sometimes. It's clear she's your world. Clara felt her chest tightened. Nobody had asked about Arya in months. Not old friends, not former colleagues. Everyone had distanced themselves after the scandal. But here was her boss, a man she barely knew, remembering the name of her daughter. "She's perfect," Clara said, her voice thick. "Exhausting, but perfect." Evan smiled, a real smile this time, and Clara felt something crack open inside her. She hadn't seen someone look at her with warmth in so long. "Would you like to get some air?" Evan asked, glancing toward the balcony. "It's a bit suffocating in here." Clara hesitated, then nodded. They stepped outside into the cool night, the sounds of the party muffled behind glass doors. The city stretched out below them, lights twinkling like stars. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, shivering slightly. Without a word, Evan slipped off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. Clara looked up at him, surprised. "You don't have to." "I know," Evan said simply. They stood in silence for a moment, both staring out at the skyline. Clara felt the weight of everything she'd been holding back pressing against her ribs. She wanted to ask him why he'd helped her, why he kept showing up, why he seemed to care. But she was afraid of the answer. "Can I ask you something?" Clara finally said. "Of course. Why did you help me? After the broadcast, after everything with Liam, why did you care?" Evan didn't answer right away. He leaned against the railing, his expression distant. "I watched that broadcast live," he said quietly. "I saw what he did to you, and I saw everyone else treat it like entertainment, like your pain was just another storyline." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I've lost someone before, someone I loved. And I remember what it felt like when people moved on before I was ready. Well, the world expected me to be fine because time had passed." He looked at Clara then, his eyes intense. "I saw you in that moment, and I couldn't look away. You deserved better than what you were getting." Clara's throat closed. She hadn't expected honesty like that, vulnerability like that. "I didn't do it for recognition," Evan continued. "I didn't do it expecting anything back. I just couldn't stand by and do nothing." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "You saved me," she whispered. "I don't know if you realize that, but you did." Evan reached out slowly, carefully, and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The touch was gentle, tentative, and it sent electricity through Clara's skin. "You saved yourself," Evan said. "I just gave you a place to land." They stood there, inches apart, the air between them charged with something neither of them was ready to name. Clara's heart raced. She wanted to close the distance, to feel his arms around her, to let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could trust someone again. But before either of them could move, Evan's phone buzzed. He pulled back, glancing at the screen, and his expression shifted. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice tight. "I have to take this." Clara nodded, pulling his jacket tighter around herself as he stepped away to answer the call. She watched him through the glass doors, saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his free hand ran through his hair. When he returned, the warmth was gone, replaced by something guarded. "Everything okay?" Clara asked. "Board issues," Evan said shortly. "Nothing that concerns you." Clara flinched at the sudden coldness in his tone. Evan seemed to notice, his expression softening slightly. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean it like that. It's just complicated." Clara handed him back his jacket. "I should go. Aria's babysitter has school tomorrow." Evan nodded, but didn't move to stop her. Clara walked back inside, feeling the weight of disappointment settle in her chest. For a moment, she'd let herself hope. And hope, she was learning, was dangerous. But as she reached the elevator, she glanced back one last time. Evan stood on the balcony, watching her leave, his expression unreadable. And in that moment, Clara realized something terrifying. She was falling for him. Have you ever felt a connection so strong it scared you? Would you run from it, or risk everything to see where it leads? The kiss almost happened on a Tuesday. Clara had stopped by the office to drop off some documents. Arya strapped to her chest in a baby carrier when she ran into Evan in the hallway. Literally ran into him, papers scattering across the polished floor. "I'm so sorry," Clara said, crouching down to gather the mess while trying not to wake Arya. Evan knelt beside her, helping. Their hands brushed over the same document, and they both froze. Clara looked up, finding his face inches from hers, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Clara," he said softly, his voice rough around the edges. She waited, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. The hallway was empty. Just the two of them and a sleeping baby in a moment that felt like it could change everything. But then Arya stirred, letting out a small cry, and the spell broke. Evan pulled back, helping Clara to her feet, his touch lingering just a second longer than necessary on her arm. "She's beautiful," Evan said, looking at Arya with something that looked like longing. "You're doing an incredible job." "I'm trying," Clara admitted. "Some days are harder than others." Evan's jaw tightened. "You shouldn't have to do it alone." There was weight in those words, layers of meaning Clara wasn't sure how to unpack. Before she could respond, his assistant appeared, reminding him of a meeting. Evan excused himself, but not before Clara saw the conflict in his eyes. He wanted to stay. She could feel it. Over the next month, their interactions grew more frequent. Evan started inviting Clara to charity events, always with the excuse that it was for networking for the company's image. But the way he looked at her during those evenings, the way he found reasons to stand close, to touch her hand when helping her out of cars told a different story. One evening, after a particularly successful fundraiser, Evan drove Clara home himself. The streets were quiet, rain pattering against the windshield. Clara felt the tension building between them, thick and electric. "Can I ask you something personal?" Clara said, breaking the silence. Evan glanced at her. "Of course. The woman you lost. Sophie. Do you still think about her?" Evan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. For a moment, Clara thought she'd crossed a line. But then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every day," he admitted, "but not the way I used to. It used to be all-consuming. Now it's just there, a part of me I'll never get back." He paused at a red light, turning to face her. "But lately, I've been thinking about other things, about what it means to move forward." Clara's chest ached. "Do you think you're ready for that?" Evan held her gaze. "I think I'm trying to be." The light turned green, and he drove on. When they reached Clara's building, Evan walked her to the door despite the rain. They stood under the small awning, both soaked, both hesitant to say goodnight. "Thank you," Clara said, "for everything. For tonight, for the job, for—" "Stop thanking me," Evan interrupted gently. "You don't owe me anything, Clara." "Then what do you want from me?" The question came out more desperate than she intended. Evan stepped closer, his hand reaching up to brush a wet strand of hair from her face. "I want you to be happy. I want you to feel safe. And I want—" He trailed off, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "I want things I have no right to want." Clara's breath hitched. "What if I want them to?" The air between them crackled. Evan's eyes dropped to her lips, and Clara's heart nearly stopped. This was it, the moment she'd been both craving and dreading. But Evan pulled back, his expression pained. "You deserve more than a broken man's comfort, Clara. You deserve someone who can give you everything, not someone still putting himself back together." Clara felt the rejection like a physical blow. "What if I don't want everything? What if I just want you?" Evan closed his eyes, as if her words hurt him. "You don't know what you're asking for." "Then show me," Clara whispered. For a heartbeat, she thought he might. His hand still cupped her face, his body leaning toward hers. But then he dropped his hand and stepped back into the rain. "Good night, Clara," he said, his voice thick with restraint. Clara watched him walk away, her heart breaking and mending and breaking again all at once. She went inside, checked on Arya with the babysitter, and then collapsed on her bed, tears streaming down her face. She was falling in love with Evan Rothwell, and he was pushing her away because he thought he wasn't good enough, because he thought she deserved better. But Clara didn't want better. She wanted him, broken pieces and all. That night, Evan sat at his piano for the first time in 5 years. His fingers found the keys, hesitant at first, then more sure. The melody he played was the one he'd started for Sophie, the one he'd never finished because finishing it meant accepting she was gone. But tonight, the notes came differently. They shifted, evolved, became something new. Not a goodbye to Sophie, but a hello to possibility. To Clara, to the terrifying idea that maybe, just maybe, he could love again. He played until his fingers ached, until the sun started to rise, until the song was complete. And when he finished, he sat in the silence, tears streaming down his face, knowing he'd just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. He was in love with Clara Wynne, and that scared him more than anything ever had. Have you ever loved someone but held back because you didn't think you were worthy of them? Would you risk losing them forever or fight for what your heart knows is right? The past came back with a vengeance on a Monday morning. Clara was feeding Arya breakfast when her phone exploded with notifications. Text messages, emails, social media tags. Her hands shook as she opened the first one. Liam's face stared back at her from a tabloid headline. Liam Cross. My ex-wife moved on before I did, and it breaks my heart. Clara's stomach dropped. She clicked the article, her vision blurring as she read his lies. He claimed he'd made a mistake leaving her, that he'd been under pressure from his management, that he wanted to reconcile for the sake of their daughter. But the worst part was the photo attached. Clara and Evan at the charity gala, his jacket around her shoulders, looking at each other with unmistakable intimacy. The caption read, Clara Wynne, once America's most pitted woman, seems to have found comfort in billionaire Evan Rothwell's arms. Sources say their relationship began shortly after her divorce, raising questions about the timeline and nature of their connection. Clara's phone rang. It was her lawyer. Clara, we need to talk. Liam's team is spinning this into a custody case. They're claiming you abandoned your marriage for financial gain and that Evan has been involved since before the divorce was finalized. That's not true, Clara said, her voice shaking. I didn't even know Evan until after. I know, but perception matters. They're building a narrative, and the media is eating it up. We need to respond carefully. Clara hung up and immediately called Rothwell Enterprises. She needed to warn Evan, to apologize for dragging him into her mess. But when she reached his assistant, the woman's voice was cold. Mr. Rothwell is in an emergency board meeting. I'll let him know you called. The line went dead. Clara felt panic rising in her chest. This was exactly what Evan didn't need. His company, his reputation, his carefully constructed life, she was destroying all of it just by existing in his orbit. By afternoon, the story had gone viral. News outlets picked it up. Social media erupted. People who'd forgotten about Clara's humiliation now had fresh material to dissect. Comments flooded in, half defending her, half tearing her apart. She's using him for his money. Liam deserves another chance. She's keeping his daughter from him. Evan Rothwell is being played by a gold digger. Clara turned off her phone and held Arya close, tears streaming down her face. She'd worked so hard to rebuild her life, to find peace, and now it was all crumbling again. That evening, Evan's assistant called. Mr. Rothwell needs to see you. Tomorrow morning. His office. The tone left no room for argument. Clara barely slept that night, running through every possible scenario. Was he going to fire her? Distance himself? Tell her this was all a mistake? When she arrived at Rothwell Tower the next morning, the atmosphere was tense. Employees whispered as she passed. Security escorted her directly to Evan's office on the top floor. She'd never been there before. It was massive, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Evan stood with his back to her, staring out at the skyline. He didn't turn when she entered. Mr. Rothwell, Clara started, her voice small. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to. The board wants me to let you go. Evan interrupted, his voice flat. They say you're a liability, that your presence is damaging the company's image. Clara's heart shattered. I understand. I'll resign today. I told him no. Evan finally turned to face her, and Clara saw the storm in his eyes. I told him you're the best hire we've made in years, and that if they want you gone, they'll have to fire me too. Clara's breath caught. Evan, you can't risk your company for me. Can't I? His voice rose, frustration bleeding through. Do you know what I built here, Clara? An empire based on cold decisions and calculated risks. I've spent 5 years avoiding anything that resembles feeling because feeling meant pain. He crossed the room toward her, his intensity overwhelming. And then you walked into my life, broken and brave and so damn strong. And you reminded me what it means to care about something more than profit margins. But your reputation, I don't care about my reputation. Evan stopped inches from her, his hands clenched at his sides like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her. I care about you, and Arya, and the fact that I can't stop thinking about you, can't stop wanting to protect you, can't stop. He broke off, turning away. Clara's tears fell freely now. What are you saying? I'm saying the board can threaten all they want. I'm saying Liam can leak whatever lies he wants. I'm saying that I'm done pretending I don't feel what I feel. He faced her again, his expression raw. But I need to know something first. That night at your door, when I walked away, was that what you wanted? Or did I make the wrong call? Clara's voice broke. You made the wrong call. Evan closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands cupping her face, his forehead resting against hers. Then let me make it right. But before he could kiss her, his office door burst open. His lead board member stood there, face red with anger. Rothwell, we need to talk. Now. Investors are pulling out. The Patterson deal is dead. This scandal is costing us millions. Evan didn't move, didn't let go of Clara, then let them pull out. Are you insane? The board member sputtered. This woman is destroying everything you've built. No, Evan said quietly, dangerously. She's showing me what actually matters. And if the board can't see that, maybe you need a new CEO. The room fell silent. Clara pulled back, horror washing over her. Evan, don't. Please don't throw away everything for me. Evan looked at her, his eyes soft despite the chaos around them. Clara, don't you understand? You're not asking me to throw anything away. You're asking me to choose. And I'm choosing you. The board member slammed the door on his way out. Within minutes, Evan's phone was ringing off the hook. Crisis management, legal teams, investors demanding explanations. Clara stood frozen, watching Evan's life implode because of her. I should go, she whispered. This is too much. I can't let you sacrifice everything. You're not letting me do anything, Evan said firmly. This is my choice, but I need you to make one too. Are you willing to fight through this storm with me? Or are you going to run because you think you're not worth fighting for? Clara stared at him, this man who'd saved her, who'd seen her at her worst and stayed, who was willing to risk everything just to stand by her side. And she realized something crucial. She'd been running her whole life. From pain, from judgment, from the fear that she wasn't enough. But Evan made her want to stop running, made her want to believe she was worth fighting for. I'm not running, Clara said, her voice stronger now. Not this time. Evan smiled, really smiled, and pulled her into his arms. Outside his office, the world was falling apart. But in that moment, holding each other, they both felt something they hadn't felt in years. Hope. When the whole world tells you to walk away from someone, but your heart tells you to stay, which voice do you listen to? Clara left the office that day with a promise and a warning. Evan promised they'd face whatever came together. The warning came from his security team. Liam was planning something big. A televised interview. A tell-all that would paint Clara as a manipulator and Evan as her accomplice. The interview was scheduled for Friday, 3 days away. 3 days for Clara to decide if she was going to let Liam control the narrative again, or if she was finally going to fight back. She spent those days in a fog, barely sleeping, constantly checking her phone for updates. Evan called every night, his voice a lifeline in the chaos. He'd already hired a crisis management team, already prepared legal action if Liam crossed certain lines. But Clara knew none of it would matter if she didn't find her own voice. On Thursday night, Clara sat in her living room, Arya asleep in her arms, staring at her laptop. The interview was being promoted everywhere. Liam's face plastered across social media with the tagline, "The truth about Clara Wynn." Her phone rang. It was Evan. "Don't watch it," he said immediately. "Whatever he says, don't give him the satisfaction." "I have to," Clara said. "I need to know what I'm up against." "Clara, I'm tired of hiding, Evan. I'm tired of letting other people tell my story." She paused, her resolve hardening. "I think I need to do my own interview." Silence on the other end. Then, "Are you sure?" "No," Clara admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway." Evan didn't try to talk her out of it. Instead, he made calls. By Friday morning, Clara had her own interview scheduled. Same time as Liam's, different network. A side-by-side broadcast. The media called it a divorce showdown. Clara called it survival. She sat in the makeup chair, her hands shaking, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. The host, a woman named Patricia, known for tough but fair interviews, came to prep her. "We'll start with the night of the announcement," Patricia said gently. "Then move to the aftermath, your relationship with Mr. Rothwell and Liam's current claims. You can stop any time. Just say the word." Clara nodded, her throat tight. "I'm ready." But when the cameras turned on and Patricia asked the first question, Clara froze. All the words she'd practiced vanished. All she could see was Liam on the monitor across the studio, sitting confidently in his interview, already spinning his lies. "Ms. Wynne," Patricia prompted gently, "can you tell us what that night was like for you?" Clara looked at the camera. Somewhere out there, Evan was watching. Arya was safe with a babysitter. This was her moment, her truth. "It felt like dying," Clara said, her voice steady despite the tears. "Not physically, but the person I thought I was, the wife, the partner, the woman who believed in forever, she died on that stage. And the worst part wasn't the divorce. It was watching people applaud it, watching the world decide I deserved it without knowing anything about me." Patricia leaned forward. "And Mr. Rothwell? When did he enter the picture?" "He saved me," Clara said simply. "Not romantically. Not at first. He saw me at my lowest and decided I was worth helping. No cameras. No agenda. Just kindness when I needed it most." She paused. "Yes, we developed feelings. Yes, it's complicated. But it didn't happen the way Liam is claiming. Evan wasn't part of the divorce. He was part of the healing." On the other monitor, Liam was answering a similar question, his version completely different. He claimed Clara had been distant, cold, obsessed with money and status. That he'd found evidence of her communicating with Evan before the divorce announcement. Patricia showed Clara the clip. "How do you respond to these allegations?" Clara felt rage bubble up, hot and sharp. "Liam is lying, and he knows it. The phone records will prove it. The timeline will prove it. But that's not even the point." She looked directly into the camera. "The point is that I spent 2 years making myself smaller, so he could shine brighter. I gave up my career, my friends, my identity. And when I was 8 months pregnant with his child, he decided I wasn't convenient anymore. So he threw me away on live television and expected me to disappear quietly." "But you didn't disappear," Patricia observed. "No," Clara said, her voice stronger now. "I didn't. Because I have a daughter who needs to see that being knocked down doesn't mean you stay down. And because I met someone who reminded me that my worth isn't determined by who chooses to leave." The interview continued for 20 minutes. Clara answered every question, her confidence growing with each one. She talked about the hospital, the job, the slow rebuilding of her life. She admitted that falling for Evan scared her, that trusting again felt impossible. But she also said she was tired of letting fear make her decisions. Meanwhile, Liam's interview grew increasingly defensive. He stumbled over questions about timing, contradicted his own timeline, and when pressed about why he'd made the announcement on live television, he had no good answer. By the time both interviews ended, social media had already picked a side. Clara's raw honesty resonated. Liam's polished lies fell flat. The tide was turning. But Clara didn't watch the reactions. She went straight from the studio to Evan's apartment. He'd given her the address that morning with a simple text: "I'll be waiting, however it goes." She knocked on his door, still in her interview clothes, mascara probably smudged, heart racing. Evan opened it immediately, and the look on his face, relief, pride, something deeper, made her knees weak. "You were incredible," he said. Clara walked into his arms, burying her face in his chest, finally letting herself fall apart. Evan held her, one hand in her hair, the other pressed against her back, anchoring her. "I was so scared," Clara whispered. "I know," Evan said, "but you did it anyway. That's what courage looks like." Clara pulled back just enough to look at him. "What happens now?" Evan's thumb traced her cheekbone. "Now we stop hiding, stop apologizing for feeling something real, and we deal with whatever comes next together. Your company will survive," Evan interrupted, "or it won't. Either way, I'm not losing you to protect a business." Clara's breath hitched. Evan, you can't mean that. I've never meant anything more. His eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. I spent 5 years building walls, Clara, convincing myself that work was enough, that I didn't need anything else. And then you showed up and reminded me what it feels like to be human, to care, to want something beyond the next deal. He cupped her face in both hands. So no, I'm not sacrificing you for the company. I'm choosing life over survival. I'm choosing you. Clara kissed him then, finally, after months of almost and what if and not yet. And Evan kissed her back, deep and desperate and full of everything they'd been holding back. It was a kiss that tasted like tears and relief and the terrifying beauty of letting yourself fall. When they broke apart, both breathless, Clara rested her forehead against his. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. How to be with someone again. How to trust. Neither do I, Evan said. But we'll figure out, one day at a time. That night, they sat on his balcony, the city lights spread out below them, and talked until sunrise. About their fears, their pasts, their hopes for a future that still felt fragile. And for the first time since everything fell apart, Clara let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, broken things could be beautiful too. Have you ever had to choose between protecting yourself and fighting for love? Which would you choose and why? The backlash came swift and brutal. Liam's fans refused to accept his lies had been exposed. They flooded Clara's social media with hate, sent threatening messages, even showed up at her building. Security had to be hired. Routines had to change. Arya couldn't be taken to the park without bodyguards. Evan's company faced its own storm. 3 major investors pulled out. The board called emergency meetings. Rumors swirled that Evan would be forced to step down as CEO. But every time the pressure mounted, Evan made the same choice. He chose Clara. He showed up at her apartment with dinner when she was too exhausted to cook. He hired the best lawyers to handle Liam's custody threats. He held Arya while Clara slept, rocking the baby and humming melodies Clara didn't recognize. He became part of their small family without demanding space or gratitude. 2 weeks after the interviews, Clara woke to a knock at her door. She opened it to find Evan standing there with a suitcase and a sheepish expression. The board voted, he said. I'm officially on temporary leave while they assess the situation. He made air quotes, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Clara's heart sank. Oh, Evan, I'm so sorry. Don't be. He stepped inside, setting down his bag. I'm not. For the first time in 5 years, I have time. Time to think, to breathe, to figure out what I actually want. He looked at her, his expression softening. Time to do this right. Do what right? You, Evan said simply. Us. I've been so focused on protecting you from distance, keeping things professional, not overwhelming you. But the truth is, Clara, I'm in love with you. And I want to be here. Fully here. Not just for the crisis moments, but for the boring Tuesday nights and the 3 a.m. feedings and the grocery store runs. He paused. If you'll have me. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. You love me. Completely. Evan said without hesitation. You and Arya both. I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. But I'm tired of pretending I feel anything less. Clara closed the distance between them, her hands fisting in his shirt. I love you too. It terrifies me, but I do. Evan's smile was blinding. He kissed her softly, reverently, like she was something precious he'd been afraid to break. And let me stay. Let me be part of this life you're building. So he stayed. And slowly, day by day, they built something neither of them had believed possible. A life that wasn't perfect or polished or public. Just real. Evan learned how to change diapers and warm bottles. Clara learned to accept help without feeling like a burden. They cooked meals together in her tiny kitchen, laughed at terrible movies during Arya's naps, and talked about futures that didn't involve tabloids or scandals. But the outside world wouldn't let them hide forever. Liam continued his media campaign, each interview more desperate than the last. He claimed Clara was poisoning Arya against him, that Evan was manipulating her, that he deserved a chance to be a father. Clara's lawyer advised patience. He's spiraling. Let him dig his own grave. But one night, Liam showed up at Clara's building, drunk, angry, demanding to see his daughter. Security held him back while he shouted accusations, his words slurred and vicious. Clara stood at her window with Arya in her arms, watching the man she'd once loved fall apart on the sidewalk below. She felt pity, but not love. Not anymore. Evan came up behind her, his arms wrapping around both of them. "Want me to go down there?" "No," Clara said quietly. "He's not worth it. He never was." The police came and escorted Liam away. The incident made headlines the next morning, this time with public opinion firmly on Clara's side. Even Liam's fans couldn't defend his behavior anymore. A week later, Liam's lawyer reached out with a settlement offer. He'd relinquish custody claims in exchange for Clara agreeing not to press harassment charges. Clara signed immediately. She didn't want his money or his apologies. She just wanted him gone. The papers finalized on a Tuesday. Clara stood in her lawyer's office, pen in hand, and felt a weight lift that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. This chapter was over. Really, truly over. She walked out into the sunlight where Evan waited with Arya. He'd taken her to the park while Clara handled the paperwork, and now Arya's face was covered in ice cream, her tiny hands sticky and happy. "It's done," Clara said, her voice breaking with relief. Evan kissed her forehead. "How do you feel?" "Free," Clara whispered. "For the first time in years, I feel free." That night, they celebrated quietly. Just the three of them in Clara's apartment, Chinese takeout, and cheap wine, and Arya babbling happily in her playpen. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't what Clara had imagined her life would look like at 27. But it was real, and it was hers. Evan sat at her old keyboard, the one she'd bought from a thrift store, and played the melody he'd finished the night of Clara's interview. "This is for you," he said. "The song I could never complete until you came into my life." Clara listened, tears streaming down her face as the music filled the small space. It was beautiful and sad and hopeful all at once. When he finished, she crossed the room and kissed him, pouring every ounce of gratitude and love into that kiss. "Play it at our wedding," Clara said against his lips. Evan pulled back, his eyes wide. "Is that a proposal?" Clara laughed through her tears. "Maybe, if you're interested." Evan's grin was answer enough. He kissed her again, deeper this time, until Arya let out an indignant shriek demanding attention. They broke apart, laughing, and Evan scooped up the baby, spinning her in circles until she giggled. Clara watched them, her daughter and the man who'd saved them both, and felt something settle deep in her chest. This was her family. Chosen, hard-won, imperfect, but real. And that was worth every ounce of pain it had taken to get here. If someone told you that the worst moment of your life would lead you to the best person you'd ever meet, would you believe them? Or would you need to live it to understand? 1 year later, Clara stood backstage at the same studio where her world had fallen apart. But this time, she wasn't here to be humiliated. She was here to speak, to reclaim the narrative one final time. The charity event was Evan's idea. A live broadcast, he'd said. But this time you control the story. You show them who you really are. Clara had been terrified at first. The thought of those lights, that stage, made her physically ill. But Evan held her hand through every moment of preparation, and eventually, Clara realized something important. The stage hadn't destroyed her. Liam had, and she'd survived him. The stage was just wood and lights. She could handle it. The audience was different this time. Not just journalists and celebrities, but real people. Families helped by the children's hospital they were fundraising for. Single mothers, survivors of abuse and public shaming. People who'd found Clara's story and seen themselves in it. Clara wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back, no pretense or performance. Arya, now a toddler with wild curls and Evan's smile, sat in the front row with him, waving at her mother. The host introduced Clara with kindness. No mention of the scandal, just her work with the charity and her role at Rothwell Enterprises. When Clara walked onto the stage, the applause was genuine. Warm. She felt tears prick her eyes before she even reached the microphone. "Thank you," Clara started, her voice steady. "A year ago, I stood on a stage like this and watched my life fall apart in front of millions. I thought that was my ending. The final chapter of a story I'd never wanted to be part of. She paused, finding Evan's eyes in the crowd. But it wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. She told her story then. Not the tabloid version, but the truth. The rain-soaked night, Evan's driver found her. The clinic where she felt safe for the first time. The job that gave her purpose. The slow, terrifying process of learning to trust again. Someone once told me that being broken isn't the end, Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. It's how the light gets in. And I've learned that's true. But here's what they don't tell you. Letting the light in hurts. It's scary and messy, and sometimes you want to close yourself off again, because at least darkness is familiar. She looked directly into the camera. But if you can survive the discomfort of healing, if you can let people see your scars and still believe you're worthy of love, something incredible happens. You become whole in a way you never were before. The audience was silent, captivated. Clara felt powerful, not in the way celebrity had made her feel, but in a deeper, truer way. I'm not here to trash my ex-husband, Clara continued. He's living his own life, dealing with his own demons. I'm here to tell you that public shame doesn't have to define you. That one person's cruelty doesn't determine your worth. And that somewhere out there, someone will see past the headlines and love you for exactly who you are. She smiled at Evan. I found mine. But even if I hadn't, I would still be enough. We all are. The applause was deafening. Clara felt it wash over her, healing something deep inside that she hadn't known was still wounded. She finished her speech, announced the fundraising total, over $2 million, and stepped off the stage into Evan's arms. You were perfect, he whispered, kissing her temple. Arya squirmed between them, demanding attention. Mama, Mama up. Clara scooped her up, holding her close, and felt complete. This small family, built from broken pieces, was more beautiful than anything she'd had before. Later that night, after the cameras were off and the crowd had dispersed, Evan led Clara back onto the empty stage. The lights were dim now, the studio quiet. What are we doing? Clara asked, laughing. Evan pulled a small box from his pocket and dropped to one knee. Clara's breath caught, her hand flying to her mouth. I know we talked about this, Evan said, his voice rough with emotion. But I wanted to do it here, where your old life ended and your new one began. Clara Wynne, you've taught me that broken things can heal, that walls can come down, and that love is worth every risk. He opened the box, revealing a simple diamond ring. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life showing you how extraordinary you are? Clara was crying too hard to speak. She nodded frantically, dropping to her knees beside him. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Evan slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her, deep and slow and full of promise. Somewhere in the back of the studio, the skeleton crew who'd stayed late burst into applause. Clara pulled back, laughing through her tears. Did you plan this? Maybe, Evan admitted, grinning. I wanted witnesses. Wanted the world to see me choose you. Properly this time. Clara kissed him again, her heart so full it ached. This was redemption. Not the public kind, but the personal kind. The kind that mattered. 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony by the ocean. No cameras, no press. Just family, real friends, and Arya toddling down the aisle with flowers in her hair. Clara wore a simple white dress and felt more beautiful than she ever had in designer gowns. Evan played their song on a piano set up on the beach. Clara cried through her vows. Arya shrieked with delight when they kissed. It was perfect in its imperfection. That night, as they danced under string lights with the ocean as their backdrop, Clara looked at the life she'd built from ashes and felt gratitude so profound it took her breath away. What are you thinking? Evan asked, pulling her close. That I wouldn't change a thing, Clara said. Not the pain, not the scandal, not the fear. Because it all led me here. To you. To this. Evan kissed her softly. Me too. And in that moment, surrounded by love and chosen family and the promise of tomorrow, Clara understood the truth she'd been searching for all along. Never let public shame define private worth. Because somewhere out there, someone sees the beauty in your scars and calls it love. And when you find them, When you find yourself, you realize that being broken was never the end of your story. It was just the beginning of becoming whole. Thank you for joining Clara's journey from heartbreak to healing, from public shame to private triumph. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt broken and wondered if you could heal, or if you believe in second chances and the power of real love, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. We have more inspiring stories of hope, redemption, and courage coming your way, and we don't want you to miss a single one. Asterisk, asterisk. Drop a comment below and tell us. Have you ever had to rebuild your life from scratch? What gave you the strength to keep going? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Share your thoughts, inspire others, and let's build a community where broken doesn't mean defeated. It means becoming stronger. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and join our family. Because everyone deserves a story where the ending is better than the beginning. We'll see you in the next one. And remember, your scars don't define you. Your courage does. Until next time, keep believing in second chances. Keep fighting for your happiness. And never, ever let anyone make you feel like you're not enough. Because you are. You always were. Subscribe, comment, share, and let's keep spreading hope together.